All right. Yep, I got my email already that says we're live. That's what I
Okay.
wait for. And then all we do is make sure people in the chat here can hear us. And we
Okay.
start and go from there. Want to give us an audio test?
Okay.
Then we'll wait to see if people... There's a delay, so I'm just waiting for them to reply.
Is the fan in the background too loud? Or
I
can
don't
you
hear
not
it
even
at
hear it?
all.
Okay.
Oh, they say loud and clear, working great. Yeah, I have a fan in my window because it was like 88 degrees and 88 humidity here.
Yeah.
And then it rained and now it's decent. So I'm trying to get the disgusting air out of my rooms here.
Yeah.
All right, well, you want to introduce yourself or do you want me to attempt to?
Doesn't matter to me. What do you
Well,
usually do?
I feel like I'd be a poor host if I didn't introduce you first.
So go ahead, introduce me first, and I'll tell you everything you got wrong.
Good. I like that. That's how I always try to do questions on this show. So, well, here we have Stephen Dorrick from LOJ Conversions Corporation. Is that the whole? Look at me go.
That's the fancy name, yes.
I was looking at it the other day because I always say LOJ, and then most people
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about. So, what Steven does is specializes in swapping in LS series small block Chevy engines into nearly every Nissan platform known and some kind of unknown. And one of the big things that you do is the integration, in my opinion. And then the other thing is the fit and finish of all the parts. So we can get
Okay.
into that later. I can talk about it because yours is like one of the only bolt-in kits that I've ever just bolted in. So,
What a concept.
yes. So is that all correct? And do you want to add to that?
Sure, that's all correct.
Look at me go. Uh, all right. Well, I guess I have a couple questions. Was there anything else you
Sure.
wanted to lead with?
No, I'm going to let you run the show. It's your podcast, so
Ah, my buddy Justin Kramer says a fellow beard enthusiast.
yeah. This is October, so
Wow.
I
The
was
last
clean.
time I saw you, you were only like 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
maybe just a trim. And then I
yeah,
saw you the other day with the beard, and I was like, "Oh man, you got a beard bigger than Jeremy." And then I saw in the
yeah,
video where he's like, "I feel emasculated by your
yeah.
beard."
Beard envy.
He's
Yeah,
like, "It took me years to do this, and it took you like 9 months."
yeah. Yeah, I'm actually planning on trimming it probably tomorrow for the
Oh,
summer. It's getting a little crazy,
yeah. Well, as
but
soon as it got, I had like hair and beard, and as soon as it gets warm, I'm like, phew,
yeah,
goodbye
yeah.
all of it. My daughter cut mine off in October, also.
I'm waiting for the night I wake up to my wife just like,
Just sawing
yeah,
it.
yeah, it's gonna
Oh,
happen.
well, the first one is I would ask simple things, not even business related, so it's not all
Sure.
work and instead of play. So, what got you into cars?
Oh, geez. So, you want to go all the way back, like way, way back?
Yeah, it could be like when you were
Yeah.
5 and someone almost ran you over and you thought the car was cool or something.
I was actually run over when I was 11.
You're kidding.
Actual tire tracks across the back run over.
Jeez.
Yes.
That's what I have such a.
My neighbor's babysitter and her Suzuki Samurai,
Wow,
and we
what a
had,
story. A
yeah,
Suzuki
yeah. She
Samurai.
she ran the stop sign and ran me over. But
At least it was a Samurai, so it weighed like 450 pounds.
yeah, exactly. So I survived, no broken bones, just cuts and bruises. But no, I never really actually got into cars until probably like late senior year of high school, getting into college.
Hmm.
Um, my dad, well, my grandfather was a mechanic, and my dad learned how to wrench on cars from him. And then my dad taught me, but my dad was not a mechanic. He actually worked in a lumber yard his whole life. He's a dry kiln operator. So
Hmm.
he was in charge of drying lumber for companies like Steinway and Paul Reed Smith, like Fine Instruments, things like that. A lot of exotic lumbers. And that's what he did his whole life. 40 years he worked in that industry. And my first time driving actually was driving a forklift at the lumberyard when I was like 10 or 12 years old, something like that. But when I was a senior in high school, my first car was a 1981 Toyota Cressida. So I'm sure some guys watching know Toyota Cressidas, but it was basically like the luxury sedan that Toyota had in the 80s. And it actually had the straight six out of the Supra in it, and it was rear wheel drive. But I mean, in 81, it still probably made 50 horsepower and was like a dog.
I know somebody with a 2JZ swapped Cressida.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then also in Australia, they have a Cressida, but that car is different. It's not the same.
It's the Cresta.
Cresta. Okay.
Yeah, one less syllable for some reason. I guess the Aussies can't handle 3 syllables. I know.
Yeah, they shorthand everything.
But yeah, that was my first car. It was actually my sister's car. Then I got it from her. It was a hand-me-down, and drove that for a while. And then I got an '89 Honda Civic sedan. And then while I was driving my Civic, my dad, for as long as I've been alive, has had this ability to like find ridiculous deals on stuff just randomly. He's the guy that'll like drive down the road, and if he sees a car laying in like the weeds in somebody's backyard, like he'll knock on the door, he'll leave a note. He's that guy. So he found me a '92 Honda Civic hatchback for $200. Had a blown motor and was laying for forever, but that was my first ever motor swap. So I bought that car and I did a Integra B18B swap, the not VTEC motor, because I didn't have a bunch of money as a college kid, but it was the first time doing a motor swap, and it was a bolt-in swap, and it was literally bolt-in because it was like the same platform. And before doing that motor swap, the only thing I'd ever done on a car was an oil change. So like it was kind of a pretty big undertaking for me. But my buddies and I figured it out. Huh?
That's a jump for sure.
Yeah. Well, I was in college for engineering, and I kind of felt like I could do anything. And my buddies and I, we tackled it. We got it done. And the second day I drove it was the first day of spring break freshman year, and I went around a turn too fast, understeered, and hit like a Ford F550 head on, and totaled it. Broke my leg in 3 places, and that was when I learned the most important lesson about modifying a car, is that you need to actually pay attention to the brakes and tires too, and not just keep throwing more horsepower at it. Because like the car literally had the same dry rotted tires on it that it was sitting on for years, like the original brakes, but I put a bunch of power in it, Honda power, but and I was an idiot, and I learned a lesson the hard way. I didn't walk for like 9 months, and it wasn't until junior year. I actually hadn't even sold my '89 Civic at that point. It was still for sale, so I just went back to driving that, and drove that, continued through college, and then junior year in college, my dad's like, I found a Nissan 240SX. Do you know anything about him? I'm like, I know nothing about him. He's like, well, it's in the newspaper for sale for $400. I'm like, $400? I thought, like, I didn't even know they were rear-wheel drive. I knew nothing about Nissans at the time. And I was like, well, let's go check it out. We picked it up. It had a bad, like, input shaft bearing in the transmission. It was making noise. And I did an SR20 swap in that. And this is 2000, 2001 at that point. So, like, I don't really think that Google didn't really exist. Like, there was no online search engines for finding wiring of how to wire an SR20 into a car or anything. So I literally like wire traced every wire in the harness that came with the motor I bought to relays to figure out what they did to rewire it and make it work in the 240, and it worked. And I drove that for a couple of years, and did a lot of jumping from like Nissans, like 240s, 300ZXs, stuff like that. And then the first V8 swap I did was, I'm trying to think if it was my S14 240 or if it was a 300. I think it was my S14. I did the Nissan V8, the VH45, which some of your guys might know about. It was in the 1990 to 96 Infiniti Q45 sedan.
Oh, okay.
So it's a dual overhead cam, all aluminum, 4.5 liter V8. And what was kind of cool about that motor is that back in the 90s, in order for auto manufacturers to compete in Indy, whatever engine they were homologating in their cars had to be available in a production vehicle. So that engine that was in the Q45 luxury sedan was a severely detuned version of their Indy motor. I mean, I'm sure there were structural differences too, but like for the most part, the bore and stroke was the same. Had cross-bolted 6-bolt mains, forged internals, variable valve timing, a lot of trick stuff for an engine that was developed in the mid 80s and came out in the late 80s, early 90s. So I swapped one of those into a 240SX. I bought an adapter to put a turbo 400 trans behind it, and I left the motor completely stock. I made my own terribly welded long tube headers and cold air intake. I had no idea about tuning anything, so I literally just put race gas in it and took the cam angle sensor and advanced it all the way to add as much timing as I could, and did nothing else to it, and went 1190s in the quarter mile.
Wow.
And
what year
which
was
was
that?
Fun. 05, 06.
That's pretty fast then for a street car.
Yeah. I mean, I had to gut it to get the weight down to go that quick too, but it was fun. And I've always been like a tinkerer. Like I just take stuff apart, put it back together, and like it's like that what's that video? Is it a Dilbert cartoon? Like he's got the knack, where the doctor tells the mom, your son has the knack, and he's like fixing the sonograph machine or something in the doctor's office. It's like
I haven't seen that.
It's hilarious. I'll send it to you later. But that was me, just always like taking stuff apart, putting it together. And then fast forward to, I guess, 2010, 2011, working for the Navy as an engineer, civilian. I basically spent 13 years in my career for the Navy designing tools for working on aircraft.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember my first day on the job, and my mentor said, he's like, this is not meant to be a negative statement, and don't take it as a negative statement, but just remember, you're designing tools for 18-year-old high school multi-million-dollar fighter aircraft. So you need to make it as easy to use as possible to do a really, really complex task. He didn't mean it to be mean about the guys serving at all, but it was like you have to be in that mental state where like try to make something as easy to use or as easy to whatever work on as you can. And that's like a lesson that I took very seriously, and I've applied that to the products that I make and sell now. So like you were saying how my kits actually bolt in, like I spent a lot of time learning how to make stuff actually fit and actually work together. And when I was working at the Navy, I met a guy named John Vizzosi, who's another engineer at the Navy, and he is one of the owners of PSI Conversion. They make wiring harnesses for LS swaps.
That's John at PSI.
Yep, John at PSI. So him and I met at our day job, and the naval base, they had like a once a year car show, and I brought one of my cars to the show. I don't even remember what it was. It was something I had swapped, and he's at the car show, and he's looking at this, and he's like, you should start making this stuff for like people to buy instead of just like building a one-off for myself, a one-off for my buddy, or whatever. And he kind of inspired me to start LOJ, and that's shortly after that I started the company. So
that was in like 12 or
December of 12.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I thought you had it for longer than that. No, nothing funny by that, but it seems like you've been in business longer than that.
No, this year will be 9 years.
Wow. So. The next one. Well, you went through like unknowingly. You answered like 3 of my questions.
I'm sorry. You can ask them again. It'll make you feel better.
No, that's no problem because you went over all of it. So one of them was like, what did you do before LOJ, and so you covered them. And part of this show is a lesson in me learning how to listen to people. So I let you go, and that's that's.
Yeah, I can get on a rant, so feel free to cut me off at any time.
No, that's my job is to rant, so I'm trying to pass it on to other people. Pass the ball. Okay, this one's pretty good. Why Nissans? And then what's the best performing car that you own? And what's the best performing customer car? Well, these are all multiples, so
okay.
I guess we'll read them in So why Nissans is the first
Why
question.
Nissan? Okay, well, because I had multiple 240SXs and 300ZXs, one thing I really liked and learned about Nissan vehicles is that they're a lot like Legos. They use a lot of the same stuff on every platform. So there's a lot of parts interchangeability, and they're one of the only import companies that makes rear-wheel drive cars. Hondas are all front-wheel drive. Yeah, there's Mazda RX-7s and there's Toyota Supras, but a bunch of Nissans are rear-wheel drive, and all Infinities are rear-wheel drive. So there's a lot of platforms there. If you want to go fast, rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive is kind of where it's at. Yes, I know you can make front-wheel drive cars fast, and I'm not trying to knock those guys, but you're fighting physics at the end of the day. So that was one reason. I knew the platforms well, and when I started LOJ, the first ever product I made was the transmission adapter for a 300ZX trans to the LS motor. And I knew from John that a lot of guys, John at PSI, that a lot of guys were LS swapping stuff. And I also knew that a lot of guys wanted manual transmissions and that T56s were really hard to find and expensive. Especially, I mean, they still are now. In 2012, they were too. So I knew that the Nissan 300ZX Trans architecturally is exactly the same as an R32 or R33 Skyline GTR Trans. It's just a rear-wheel drive version instead of an all-wheel drive version, but all the internals swap between them. So you can buy like a dog box gear set for a GTR and put it in a 300Z Trans. And the Transes are also dirt cheap. I mean, you can go to Junkyard, at least at that time, and buy them all day long for like $250. So I figured if I could make an adapter that was affordable, that you could buy the adapter and the transmission for half the price of a T56, and it's a strong transmission, it's a great option for guys. And then what happened at the time, I had a 1993 300ZX convertible. It was actually my wife's car. She really wanted a convertible. We just got married. I found a Z convertible, bought it for her. I drove it to Target to get, I think, diapers for our daughter.
Target.
And I come out into the parking lot and I go to start it. And while I was in Target, the one of the fuel injectors, which if you know anything about Z's and those stupid side feed injectors, they're garbage. It hung open, filled the cylinder with fuel, and when I cranked it, it hydrolocked the motor on fuel and bent the rod. So the car needed a motor, and I had already designed the transmission adapter. So I was like, I'm going to swap this. I'm going to put an LS in it. And I had never done an LS swap in anything other than like my buddy's 82 Chevy G20 van that we put an LS in, which an LS swap into something Chevy is like easy.
Yeah, you need like $35 Transdat mounts and then nothing else.
Yeah, it just bolts in. So, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And the other thing I thought about is I should make a kit for this. And one of the reasons I thought the Z32 platform was perfect is because you could go online at that point and go searching for swap kits for all sorts of import cars. And the one car nobody made a kit for was the Z32 300ZX. So I was like, if I'm going to enter a market that's a very competitive market because there's tons of companies out there, and I don't have a ton of capital to, hit the ground running with a massive ad campaign or anything like that. I'm just very much starting this out of my garage at my house. If I make myself the only option, then if somebody wants to do it, I'm going to get their business because there's going to be nobody else they can go to.
Yeah.
So when I swapped the wife's convertible, I developed all the parts in that and built off that platform, and just kind of wanted to see where the business went from there. There was no real like grand plan at that point as to what platforms I would branch out into and stuff like that. But I don't know if I'm getting off topic already on that question or not.
Nope, I don't think so. So that was, where was that? Why Nissan? So, I mean, I gathered that you had them early on, like the 240 that you got, and you liked them because they have a lot of cross-platform utility, or, I mean, I got the gist of all that. That was all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, what's the best performing car that you own?
Right now?
I would say, like, if you got rid of a lot of stuff, tell them, like, something cool or whatever.
I mean, I've had a lot of cars over the years, but the car that I currently own is probably my Frontier pickup.
Oh yeah, yep. I forgot. I
So,
always forget you have that.
yeah, so that I actually got to take that to an autocross for the first time last week. For guys who are watching and don't know, I have a 2005 Nissan Frontier pickup, which '05 is the first year of the body style they made forever. I think it's still in 2020. You could buy the same truck.
Yeah, it seems like they have. There's a 20-year body. I know exactly
Yeah,
what you're
yeah.
talking about.
They're finally redesigning them for 22.
Huh. Wow.
But it's LS swapped. It's converted to four-wheel independent suspension, so it's got a Nissan Armada rear subframe under it. It's got a Camaro ZL1 TR6060 that I made an adapter to a Trailblazer SS transfer case to keep it all-wheel drive. The LS is twin turbo. It's lowered. It's got wide wheels and tires. I built it to be like kind of an outlandish, statement that I can bring to LS Fest or other car shows and kind of advertise for the business, but it also happens to perform well and be fast. So that's probably the fastest, highest performance thing I have right now. I had my FX a couple of years ago, which was a '04 Infiniti FX SUV that had a LSA supercharged LY6 in it and a 6L90. That went 1090s in the quarter mile. It weighed 4,700 pounds with me in it, so it's kind of a heavy beast. Broke the diff every time I raced it. Like I got one pass out of a differential. Every single time, it would just destroy the crush sleeve on the pinion gear. On the launch. It would make it down the track, and as soon as I lifted off on the decel, it would be whining, and we'd be in the pits, and we'd put another diff in it. I think I put 15 diffs in that thing before I got rid of it. I tried machining a solid billets, crush sleeve, and all that stuff, and none of it worked. Then it just sheared gears off the teeth off the gears. And then I had my 300ZX that had a naturally aspirated 6.2 LS in it and a turbo 400.
That's what I saw the first time I stopped by.
Yeah. And that went 980s in the quarter mile with a naturally aspirated 6.2, which everybody at LS Fest thought I was spraying it. But
I remember asking how fast is it, and you were like, "Oh, 9s," and I was like, "Wow, 9s on motor? No one does that anymore."
Yeah, there's a reason they don't, because it's really expensive.
Yep. Yep.
But solid roller cam setup and all that, spun to 8,000 RPM, the whole deal, and that's what if you want to make power NA, you got to either add cubes or add RPM or do both. So
yeah. Huh. So was it same cubic inches, like stock cubes?
Yeah, it was a 6.2. It had a LSA crank in it, forged pistons, or like Molly high compression 12-to-1 pistons, Lunati rods, like off the shelf stuff. Nothing really trick in the bottom end. And there were stock LS3 heads that Frankenstein ported for me, and had one of those LSX, the fast LSXR intake with you could get the different length runners.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I put like the mid-length runners in it, and the solid roller cam was from Cam Motion. It was on an E38 ECU and a stock LS3 throttle body. Jeremy Formato from Faster Proms tuned it. It made 580 wheel through the turbo 400.
Wow.
So.
Dang.
Still have the motor.
Oh, you just shelved it?
Yeah, something someday.
And then the next one is, what's your best performing customer car?
Boy. Well, there's a 06 G35 at the shop right now that I built 3 years ago with a Magnuson supercharged 6.2 6L90 setup in it that made like 800 wheel, 900 torque. And it's back here now for... He wants 100 shot of nitrous put on top of it and a smaller blower pulley and a bunch of other stuff. He's from Atlanta and he does a lot of street racing with it, and he likes taking people's money. So I'm just trying to get it done as discreetly as possible. But probably all that power straight line stuff, probably his car. I've got a 300 or 350Z here that's got a built 6.2 dry sumped, like Daily Engineering dry sump setup on it. For time attack. Never heard of them? You should look at his oil pans, man. It's like CNC porn. It's amazing.
I've heard of like Aviad, but they're like the most well known, right?
Yeah, Daily makes some sick stuff.
What's it called? Daily?
Dailey, Daily Engineering. Um, it's got one of his dry sump setups on it. It's a fully caged, gutted car. It's a race car. We're running a Haltech, one of the new Nexus V5 ECUs on it.
Oh,
So it's
nice.
the combination ECU PDM deal.
Super cool.
So from a handling perspective, that's probably the best performing car I'm building or have built. And then Zandara's drift car. I mean, she wailed on that car for a couple seasons, and I just had the motor refreshed in it. She's getting back at it now because she's from Canada, so Canada's been shut down still for forever, and they're finally able to get out and have some fun again. So it's nice to see her posting videos of her racing her car now too.
And then this is all the same person still. He's one of my moderators, Killswitch. Where is LOJ going in the future?
That is an excellent question that I ask myself often. Short term is more LS stuff for more Nissan platforms, more of the more modern platforms. So, you know, I've got basic stuff available for 370Zs and G37s right now. I'm working on like the accessory drive packages for those cars. We just finished our first full CAN bus integration into one of those platforms. So all the factory gauges, push button start, air conditioning, cruise control, everything working in a 370.
Those are my favorite things. I want to talk to your CAN bus guy one day.
For sure. And I'm working right now, and I feel like I'm letting the cat out of the bag a little bit on this one, but I'm designing. It could change. Right now, it's a 5-piece oil pan for an LS. So it's 3 billet pieces and 2 fabricated aluminum pieces. It's basically an all-wheel drive oil pan for an LS motor that will allow you to bolt a Nissan front diff and axles to an LS motor so that I can swap the G35Xs, the G37Xs, so make all-wheel drive LS swaps. The front diff that's in those cars is the same diff that's in the R35 GTR. Like, it's a strong diff, and the transfer cases that are in them are electronic versions of the same transfer cases that were in the old Skyline GTRs. So the transfer cases are strong too. And I've already designed the adapter to put that transfer case behind a 6L80. So you'll be able to run basically a Gen 4 LS 6L combo, but all-wheel drive in a G or a Z or one of the SUVs or whatever you want. Put it in something else too. So
whichever one was all-wheel drive stock.
Yeah, but the beauty is like the 350Z. What I was saying earlier about the Nissan stuff all sharing the same platforms.
The Z is not, but you could
make it. You could bolt the all-wheel drive stuff in because the platform is the same. That would be crazy
to have a 4-wheel drive 350Z because no one would ever expect that.
With like a turbo 4.8 or something in it.
Yeah.
All-wheel drive. Be a lot of fun.
That'd be sick. Okay. And then
also working on other platforms, finally branching away from Nissan. I've got a 2013 Hyundai Genesis here right now that I'm swapping.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's popular.
So I'll have full kit for those, and then after that there's a BRZ coming. So
nice. I always thought those cars were cool. They just had like 100 horsepower, which I always said there's cars like that where I wish Toyota worked with GM. And they came with like an L33 and a cheap 5-speed or something that they could make many of. And then that car would have been perfect with 300 rear wheel and a stick and, anyway.
And their chassis engineering.
Yeah, apparently it's fantastic. It reminds me of like the S2000 where it came out and it was painfully slow. And this is what I always say when people talk about my Kia. Because when the S2000 came out, they go, well, it's a momentum car. It's meant to carry speed. And I'm like, no, it sucks. So, but I like whoever was diplomatic enough from Honda to call it a momentum car. So that's what people are like, man, they laugh and they're like, a Kia is really slow. And I'm like, it's a momentum car. once you're going 80, you can just sustain 80 everywhere. So don't worry about
Well,
it.
there is an old saying that a lot of times I do have to agree with. Sometimes it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than to drive a fast car slow.
Of course it is. Yeah, I don't
And
have to worry about crashing my Kia.
yeah,
And then one more question from his volley of questions is what does LOJ stand for? Man, he had a whole row of good questions.
LOJ stands for Lion of Judah. So I'm a Christian, and my company is LOJ is Lion of Judah, and the Rev 55 in the logo is Revelation 5:5. It's the only verse in the Bible that Jesus is referred to as the Lion of Judah. So that's where that comes from. I think part of my job or my business principles, trying to take care of my customers, stand behind my products, and try to do business right, stems a lot from that belief system. So I think a lot of my customers would attest to the fact that I try to do right by everybody I do business with. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a customer. If people didn't know, we talked.
Yes.
I don't know if we said it yet, but anybody that has followed probably knows that it's you. But I'll reiterate that I bought I can't even remember. I have too many cars. It's a 06 or a 07. Is it an 07 G37 or is it 08?
07 is a G35 if it's a coupe, but if it's a sedan, it's not. And then 08 is all G37.
Oh, so it's like a middle plus. So yeah. So I have an and a half year or whatever. So I bought that. Well, actually, yeah, I bought that car with a knocking engine because I knew I would swap it, and I wanted to do a manual. And again, I heard how strong those CD09s were. And then people were saying like Turbo Super guys were installing them and everything else because they're outstandingly strong. And I will say, when you try to pick one of those up and you do pick one of those up, that's how you know how strong it is. It is larger and heavier than the T56, and it shifts way better. Another reason why I like that trans is I would tune a bunch of cars, like drift cars or whatever, stick shift cars, and I'd get in some of these cars, and I'm like, man, this shift's beautiful. Is this a TR6060? And then what did it cost? And they're like, no, it's a CD09. I'm like, what is this transmission? It's like butter. And they all said the same thing, CD09. I think one of them was a CD05. They said it's not as good, but...
Yeah, the funny thing with the whole name of the CD09, Nissan has a 10-digit part numbering system. The first 5 digits, then a dash, and the last 5 digits. And the transmission's last 5 digits is CD001. And every time they revised the transmission, like upgraded the internals, changed the synchros, became CD002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're actually past 9. They're at CD00A now. But that transmission has had 10 revisions over the years. But the one that was most ubiquitous because there were some issues, especially with the CD1 through 3s and 4s with the synchros. Nissan was installing CD08s and 9s under warranty in these cars.
Into older cars.
Yeah, and so the CD09 got like the reputation of being the best. There's, from a strength perspective, there's really no difference between any of them as far as I'm aware.
Smashing the synchros out of the older ones. Mm-hmm.
They went from like
really that bad, or are people just abusing those cars?
Both.
50-50.
There were some flaws, and people were beating the snot out of them. So, but I don't know anybody that ever like broke an early transmission, like shredded gears out of it. People would just beat the synchros up, and they wouldn't shift right anymore. But like, if you granny shifted them or double clutched them, they would still hold power.
So. Yeah, I was alarmed with the beating mine took, and it has 146,000 when I started to annihilate it. I mean, I have those videos of me throwing shifts like as fast as I can into fourth and just annihilating all the gears. And I was like, I would dump that twin disc sometimes in third at a stop, and I'm like, I cannot believe the input shaft is accepting this every day.
And what's funny is you're making what, 3 to 4 times the power that the thing was stock rated for?
It made 680 wheel and 555 foot-pounds when it was turned all the way up, and I actually detuned it a little because it didn't make a difference with the 80 extra horsepower. I detuned it down to like 590 wheel, and it was still disgusting. So, oh yeah.
And Nissan's one of the few auto manufacturers out there that actually makes their own transmissions.
Oh, okay.
Like that's actually a Nissan trans. It's not like Borg Warner makes it for them or some other company. Like Nissan makes them. And I think they're one of the only auto manufacturers left that still does that. I mean, every other auto manufacturer, their transmissions all come from one place or another. Like Toyota transmissions are not Toyota transmissions. They're either Ace and Warners or ZFs. And, same thing with GM. Actually, GM
Just
still
like
does make
everything's a
their own.
Tremec or a Get Rag if they still
Yep.
use that, or yeah.
Yep. So, but a Nissan box is a Nissan box.
I forget. Oh man, I got so far off. That I literally just talked about the transmission, and I was talking about the swap kit. So I bought your ultimate swap kit, everything bolted in. I actually did the car in a weekend.
Yeah.
And it was done and running, and I would say the most amazing part, there were not many people doing what you did again. So I searched, and I think I found like 3. There was you, and there was like Sicky, and then maybe someone else. But they sell the pan and mounts, and maybe shifter stuff. You sell a complete integration solution, which people might not know. And then once I saw that, I was like, well, this is what I'm doing. And then I saw you were in New Jersey, and I'm like, hey, can I come pick everything up? And you were like, yeah, no problem. But I was most impressed, people might not know that, is you have a complete integration solution. So you have a CAN bus translation box, and my model car, and a little bit, I think very early, Nissan adapted CAN bus. So HVAC, like most of the dash controls, everything is using CAN bus. So the minute you remove that Nissan ECU, 80% of the stuff stops working.
Yeah.
So your solution takes care of all that. And then what I liked about your kit was, instead of taking all the LS stuff, it would take all the Nissan accessory drive and put it on the LS. So you didn't have to remake AC. You didn't have to redo power steering. Yeah. So I thought all that was attractive. And then I'm like, we'll see if all this stuff lines up. And then it did. Everything was perfect. So.
And it's a funny thing you mentioned that, because like I get in this discussion with people often when it comes to how much stuff I offer and do you really need all that stuff.
I used every piece of it, and I laid it out on my garage floor. I have like an oversized 2.5 bay. It took up an entire bay, everything on the floor. It was incredible.
But you fit it all in your Kia when you went home.
I loaded it all in my tan Kia, took it all home. That's a testament to the Kia Soul's capacity.
I'm going to put on my salesman hat now, which I'm an awful salesman, but most guys that are doing LS swaps, most guys are not buying a LS3 dropout out of a Corvette or out of a Camaro with a TR60 trans.
Yeah.
Most guys who are doing LS swaps are buying truck motors out of a wrecking yard.
Yeah, like mine.
And if you buy a truck motor out of a wrecking yard, it had an automatic trans behind it for one, not a manual. And it had truck accessories on it and a truck intake manifold. And none of that stuff really works very well in small rear-wheel drive import cars. So, like you had mentioned some other companies that make kits, a lot of them will assume you're running, say, Corvette accessories or a TR6060 trans out of a Camaro or something like that, when in reality, most guys don't have those parts. They've got truck accessories that the offset's so horrible, there's no room for a rad and fans in your car. And it's got an automatic flex plate on the back, so they've got to go shopping for a flywheel and find a trans and all that stuff anyway. So if you buy my kit, you can use a truck motor because it comes with the flywheel and the trans adapter and all that stuff, and a clutch if you option it with the clutch. So comes with the starter, the whole deal. So you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And coming with the accessory drive pack, you're using, like you said, the power steering pump, alternator, and AC compressor that's already in your car that was working theoretically before you swapped it, so it should continue to work. So yeah, the kit costs more money, but you're spending less on finding GM parts for the swap.
Yeah.
Because
So
you're not buying a Holley accessory drive or a GM accessory drive. You're not buying a TR6060 or a
yeah,
T56. You
I'll
know.
jump in quick and say when I was looking at I was gonna buy a swap kit and then just deal with what I had left because I just wanted to do the swap. I planned on doing a blower and just wanted to beat the shit out of a manual because I just wanted to.
Yeah.
And I knew that transmission was amazing, so I knew that would be a perfect thing to go to because the car was $2,900 with no rips in the leather interior, working 8-way heated seats, sunroof, everything, no rust underneath. I didn't realize how rusty Nissans were and how awful those cars were until I was climbing under on video and people are like, why, how is that car so clean? And I'm like, it's just, I don't know. It had 146,000, and then I drove it a bunch, and I was like, I understand now why people love these cars, because like it's like one of those driver-oriented cars, I would say. It steers nice, like it's stiff, but it doesn't jar you, and
Yep.
it just feels good to drive. But then I'm like, yeah, it has 200 horsepower, But then oh man, I get lost so easy.
The whole kit. You bought the whole kit.
Oh, well, I looked at your site because like Sicky is like motor mounts and an oil pan, and I think something for a T56. And some places have exhaust and whatever else. So I looked at your basic kit, and then I started looking at the steps, and then eventually it's like more and more, and then it's like Cook's long tubes, this, that, everything. And then the one kit's all a worked out accessory drive and a radiator. And I'm like, how about I just had a kid? He was like 3 to 6 months old. And I was like, how about I don't waste any time on this and buy? I've always made every single thing for every swap where they were like a 6-liter truck. So
Yeah.
I just hung a turbo on it. So I'm like, this would be cool. And to buy all the most, because this is such a complete working car, to make it a complete working swap. And as I went up, I said the same thing. Like, it seems expensive, but it's literally everything. So that's why I did it. And then a testament to that is I had never really worked on a Nissan ever. I understood how to put LSs in, but I'm like, it's seemingly very complex. It seems like there's a lot of parts. It seems like there's a lot to do, but it was extremely easy. And I did it in 2 days with a 3 to 6 month old. So yeah, it wasn't 14-hour days or anything, but
Yeah.
it was extremely fast. And that's a testament, like I said, to me not having to modify a damn thing. Everything just went in and the instructions were fantastic. I think I actually threw away 1 or 2 of them and I just had to get them off your website, or I called you like a moron.
Yeah.
I can't remember. So
Well, it's funny. Like I think it was 2017 or 2018 for LS Fest. My best friend from growing up, I mean, we've known each other since kindergarten. He actually bought my mom's old 03 G35 sedan stick shift 6-speed car. And I was like, you want to LS swap that? He's like, of course. I was like, so how about you drive it from Jersey to LS Fest stock? We swap it in my booth and you drive it home with the LS in it.
yep, you said
And
you
he
were
was
going
like,
to do that, and I was like, that's awesome. It's perfect.
Yeah. So that's what we did in 18. He drove that from Jersey to Kentucky, stock a drivetrain in it. We started the swap Friday morning at 9 o'clock, 9:30. 4:30 that afternoon, they turned the key and fired it up for the first time. And then 10:30 Saturday morning, they were charging the air conditioning.
Yeah, just
and I didn't touch a tool. I didn't touch a tool the entire time. I was in the booth talking to people and doing that stuff. And it was my buddy Scott and my 2 other buddies and my mechanic that works for me wrenching on it with hand tools in Holly's parking lot at Beach Bend Raceway Park. So the stuff works. So I mean, I'm really proud of that. It was a heck of a moment. I think the guy from Detroit Speed was in the booth next to us. He walked over, threw $100 bill in the windshield, and was like, $100 says there's no way you get this done. And like that afternoon, we fired it up. I was like, thanks for the $100. I'm going to buy my guys dinner.
Yeah. This is nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
A quick one here from the live chat was, are you coming out with more 240 SX stuff, specifically for S14 platform?
I have no intentions to be honest. And It's not really for any other reason than it's already an aging platform that they're getting incredibly difficult to find now, and it takes a lot of time and money to R&D new parts. Um, the other problem with 240 platforms, and again, this is me trying to be as diplomatic as I can, but it's been my experience that 240 owners in particular, and not all of them, but in general, are some of the worst bargain shoppers I've ever known.
Yeah.
Like, I very rarely sell an entire 240 kit. I get guys that buy just my mounts, and then they call me, well, will this work with so-and-so's oil pan and this other guy's trans mount and these headers and this guy's trans adapter and all? Like, it's always piecemeal stuff.
Well, they go to a drift event and they have a missile and they want to finish one for the cheapest, and then like you said, they buy someone's headers and someone's pan, and then they're like, well, none of this fits, and they get your mounts and they're worse off on all fronts.
Right.
And they're the cheapest people ever, especially the drift people, because they're just going to ruin the car. So,
and it's a shame because I still have my S14. I love that car, and I still plan on swapping it. I actually have an R33 GTR front cut, so just like the unibody and all the front suspension for all the all-wheel drive stuff, that I'm going to convert my 240 to all-wheel drive and put an all-wheel drive LS setup in it. But like, that's the exception, not the rule. Like, there are plenty of 240 guys out there that have money and want to build a really nice car, but not a lot of them compared to the amount of guys, like you said, that are just building missiles.
yeah.
So
I think in another 10 years, G35s are going to be the same. They're already the 350 and the G are already to a point where people have completely clapped out ones with almost no interior but angle kits.
Yep.
Yeah. So
and that's okay. I mean, that's the natural cycle of vehicles, man. Yeah. And then another 10 or 15 years, you're going to be finding a stock S14 on the auction for $100,000.
Yeah.
Because it's like the last one left.
But
that's what happens with every car.
I know what you mean by no one is looking to buy even your 3/4 of what you have for the S14. So developing more is a waste of money.
And people don't realize how much time, really just time, that goes into developing some of these products. Like, the accessory drives are probably some of the hardest things that I have to work on to develop for a platform, but I think have the most benefit for guys that are swapping these cars.
Oh yeah, that's when I saw that, I was like, damn. Because then literally you pull that motor out and you leave all the hard-lined everything in, and then you stick everything back in.
Yeah.
And then bolt it on, no problem.
Makes way too much sense, Matt.
Huh. Where is... people that were asking about this multiple times, but it's the same question, so we're going to go over it quick. I want to know about the Frontier VQ40DE 6-speed swap adapters. And another person asked, is the Frontier Xterra 6-speed really the same as the CD09? And we can bring up that Ackerman has your kit.
Yeah.
My friend in Colorado has your Xterra transmission kit.
Yeah. So the question, is it the same transmission? That is both a yes and a no answer. So if you were to, say, have to replace synchros or bearings or any of that stuff, it would be all the same parts, because the internal architecture is the same. Like the input shaft, output shaft, layout, the shift linkage, all that kind of stuff is the same 95% of the way. The case is different because the bolt pattern on the front end where it attaches to the motor is different, and the Nissan transmissions, they cast the bell housing as part of the trans case. So the front half of the case is different because the engine bolt pattern's different. And then the back half of the case is a different casting because the shifter's top loaded instead of being remote mounted. But all the crap inside's the same. The gear ratios are different. The Frontier's got a little bit shorter first gear because it came in a truck.
He was saying first gear is totally dumb in his.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. But, whatever. the rest of it's the same.
It's just like the AR5 is a truck transmission. So first gear is almost useless for a lot of cars, and then second is a little bit wide. But again, what other $200, $400 manual exists that's not $1 million to put into an LS and repair?
Right. And the beautiful thing about that transmission is that it is every bit as strong as a CD09 because architecturally it's the same. It's just a different case that it's in. And because the Frontier, that VQ40 engine bolt pattern is so big, we're actually able to use a stock LS diameter flywheel and clutch setup in it instead of the smaller 10-inch clutches that you use in the 350Z trans. So you can end up with a lot better torque capacity with less pedal effort. And you use the stock LS starter instead of having a different. So the adapter itself is cheaper, the transmissions are cheaper, and the clutch and all drivability is better. So like for a rear-wheel drive platform, and the shifter position is better because it's top loaded. So if you're putting it in a truck or an older muscle car or something like that, the shifter position is better.
Yeah, they're all right there. Same with the AR5.
Yep. And I make a short throw shifter for it too, and it's got the same rifle bolt shifter feel as a 350Z trans does once you put that shifter in it and get rid of the rubber two-piece shifter that came stock in the truck.
The Cummins 3500 shifter.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I knew all that from Ackerman's thing, but it's neat to hear other people know. Where is my next one I want to ask? Well, someone says, I mean, I can answer this too. So, can you manually shift a 6L80E like a 4L80E with a valve body? And that's a hard no. I don't know if you know all the semantics, but I do.
You can.
What he's asking is...
You're not manually ratcheting a shifter through valve body positions.
The gears don't exist physically.
But if you have the correct programming in the trans computer, you can manually shift it with paddles.
Yeah. What they're asking is, an 80E, you can get a manual valve body, and you don't need anything but to select the gears.
Right.
But what he might not understand is a 6L80E is a, what's that called? Mechatronic transmission. And I've tested this. If you don't have anything connected to a 6L80E, if the 6L80E is not satiated in many ways, it selects neutral. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have it connected correctly, which I learned with Arnie's car that I did a 6L80E swap with a controller, it has neutral.
That was the LT car, right?
Yeah, it has park and neutral. And that's it. So it needs to be happy enough to choose a gear. And then on top of that, it has like it has an ECU in it, or what you would call a TCU, and that has to be happy over the CAN bus. There's no solenoids that you can just ground like an 80E. It has to be so happy. So that's why, like, if you drove an early G8 or 6-speed truck, they would shift flare and do terrible things, and you would accelerate and they would just go neutral and bang the rev limiter, and then. Yeah, because the early programming was awful. So now they're incredible, and you can have a heavy 5th gen, twin turbos, 800 plus rear wheel, and they survive because of the torque management and people learning how to use them. But yeah, you'd have to have the ECU and the stock bump shifter, or truck shifter, but you can't lock it out like actual manual shift like an 80E. So that's the whole
it's funny,
answer.
like. And I am not a transmission expert. Believe me, that is not my background. I mean, I'm an engineer, and I know a lot about a little about a lot of things, but not a lot about automatic transmissions in particular. But like the 4L80Es, the 60s, the Turbo 400s, the Power Glides, all that. When those solenoids open up or close for shifting gears, they open up passages in the valve body where there's accumulators and springs, and the size of those valve passages and the spring rates of those springs kind of dictate how hard or soft the transmission shifts. But in a 6L80, 6L90, the 8Ls, the 10Ls, there's none of those accumulators in there. The rate at which the fluid moves to engage the clutches is determined by a pulse width modulation of those solenoids. And the frequency at which those solenoids are pulsing dictates the rate at which they allow the fluid to move, which dictates the rate at which the clutches engage or disengage. So it takes a lot of fancy programming to get them to work properly.
Absolutely.
But when they're working properly, they're awesome. I mean, my FX that had that supercharged LY6 in it, I had a 6L90 in that out of a Chevy Express van. And again, Jeremy tuned it for me, and Jeremy's ability to tune those 6L transmissions is pretty friggin' awesome. I'll be honest with you. Like, he's got a lot of experience with that, probably because of how many CTSVs and all he's built over the years. But like the shift firmness, but drivability as well when you're not full throttle, and the nice smooth shifts when you're just cruising around.
If anybody has driven one set up correctly, it's fantastic. Because then also you don't really need a converter, because the perfect gear splits are there for most cars and trucks. And then the mileage increase on a lot of trucks is phenomenal, and drivability, and like you said, it can shift like completely smooth down low and then chirp fourth if you're in it. But then I've also heard that what people were doing also is they learned how to make them aggressive, and they made them so aggressive it would snap pieces in the trans. So that's what it's capable of stock. So that's why you can't just ground out that PWM, because it'll max line the clutch pack and it'll break like an input or whatever inside.
What's an interesting thing that I learned too, that people watching this may or may not care about, is that I've swapped enough 6L cars now that you really want a trans computer with programming out of a Camaro or a CTSV, or even a Vet. You don't want a trans computer out of a truck. Yes, you can tune them to drive and shift more aggressively and still drive great and all that. But the one thing, Jeremy and I spent hours trying to figure it out, and to this day we still haven't. You can't make a truck TCU hold a gear.
Nope.
So like it doesn't matter what you program in HP tuners, it just doesn't give a crap. It won't do it. So like if you want to paddle up to third gear in the burnout box and bang off the limiter doing your burnout, it will force that upshift to fourth no matter what you try to command. Whereas for some reason, the trans computer or the car trans computers will let you hold gear, and you can bounce off the rev limiter and paddle shift through gears, kind of like it's a dual clutch manual. It's not. It doesn't shift like a dual clutch manual, but it'll at least let you hold the gear and do crazy burnouts and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But the truck computers, for some reason, and I don't know if that's a HP tuners limitation or a computer limitation or what.
I would say it's an operating system issue, because you might know all that too. There's different OSs. So for the truck, it's probably hard coded in somewhere that HP tuners doesn't give you the definition to change.
Yeah.
Because there's stuff for that I've run into, which people explain to me. Like if the IAT sensor is really high, there's a gas law for a fueling that you can't get to. It doesn't exist in the tables, but someone says it does exist. Yeah, like if you have a car like a Gen 3 P01 computer and it heat soaks the IAT, they start like garbage and the fuel trims are off and everything till enough clean airflow comes over the IAT. And a way you can get around that is putting them in a different spot. Everyone hear the fireworks?
Is that what that is?
Yeah. Yep. Big firework which just went off. Yeah, so there's all those nuances. I've run into it too, where some of the truck computers are great to drive some things. Some of the car computers are great to do other things. If you know you're going to do speed density, you know that some of the OSs are friendlier. And then same thing, like we found flex fuel stuff that worked well, but then other stuff wouldn't run in 80E. And luckily I know enough people with unlimited licensing, and we found a way to conglomerate like a Tahoe flex fuel system and an 80E segment from a 2500. Might close the window. They're starting to get nuts over there. Oh, regular car reviews is in here, but yeah. So that was all one 6L80E question. So
yeah,
you're as bad as me.
It's funny too, like speaking of different operating systems, when I was getting manual trans E38 ECUs from PSI for kits, like the default operating system they would put on them was '08 Corvette. Like that was just the default. And I don't have unlimited licensing on HP tuners, so I just paid for '08 Corvette, and PSI would always put the same VIN number and OS on every ECU I got for them from every car I built. So it was no big deal. But what I never realized is that '08 Corvette has a limitation on how big of a fuel injector you can put in it.
There's so many dumb things in some of the operating systems.
Right. But 10 Corvette and up doesn't. So now I switched and we use later Corvette OSs so that guys can run bigger injectors, which even the limitation in the old one isn't really a limitation because you can half one of the other tables to get double the fuel rate, whatever. But like, it's not as simple as just entering the accurate pound per minute flow rate into the fuel table.
Yeah,
In
it's called scaling, and unless you're good at that, it is a total pain in the ass. And then
Yep.
what's funny is some of the Corvette operating systems are very friendly to tune, and then some, like you said, have hard limitations and are terrible. And that's the whole funny thing. Like when I did HP Tuners classes, is I was like, I do an example where I have 3 tunes from 2011 Camaros, and then I show how completely different. Like one of them has a race car tune-up. It's perfect. It's just under like mean brake torque. It doesn't ping. It makes fantastic power. It shifts well. Then the other car shifts like garbage, is flat out way too much ignition and lean and pings balls. It sounds like nails in a paint can. And then the other one is just soft. It's soft shifts. And I'm like, these are the same 2011 Gen 5 Camaros. They're the same cars. And one is good, and one is bad, and one is too much. Like, one's going to blow a piston ring, even though it's all motor. Yeah. So I try to show people that, and I'm like, these are even the same operating system, but that's how drastically the tune is different. It makes no sense.
It's funny, when Jeremy came up here for that 370Z that he's building now, I asked him, I was like, what OS do you want on your computer? He's like, 2012 Camaro. I said, okay. That's the tuner's choice, apparently. He doesn't like Corvette OSs. It's like that OS, 2012 Camaro SS OS manual trans gives him the most flexibility in tuning. And he's obviously
less
tuning
gripe. Some of them just give you shit for no reason. Yeah. Well, everyone's like, watching him drink that massive jar is making me thirsty.
my massive Jack and Coke.
Oh, nice. Someone says, cool, I'm going to be ordering that Frontier adapter, shift, and clutch assembly for my box top soon.
Nice.
And then...
they are in... Hey, guess what?
What?
They're in stock.
Oh, yeah, look behind you. Everything's in
stock.
I know,
I have inventory. It's amazing when your stuff's not made in China, you can actually keep it in stock.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you have it right there in New Jersey. Well, someone asks if we can talk about Jamie's old 240, but maybe we'll save that. I don't know
Jamie's old 240.
Maybe we'll save that for later.
Okay.
So this is a good one. It says, what first got you into the LS bug, and why not choose any other engine, and why do you think they're the best candidate for 90%? Well, all your swaps are for.
This is going to come across really bad, Matt.
I don't care.
I don't like the LS motor.
Yeah, that's fine. Plenty of people don't.
It's all right, but here's the thing about having a business. You make what people want, not what you think is cool.
Of course. My friend has a Subaru shop. He's going to be the next guest.
So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think, like, bang for the buck, the LS is hands down the best motor to swap into anything if you want to make power on the cheap. Like, you can't beat it with anything else out there, and that's why it's so popular.
Yep.
And, like, if I had it my way, I'd be building, like, Toyota V12 1GZ swap kits for stuff, but I'd sell 3 a year. Like, the LS has a place, and if you want to have a successful business, that's why you sell kits for it. So that might be like the harsh answer for people, like, but it's the truth.
They can take it.
You know.
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Well, can you hear him again?
No, you were looking at your phone like somebody was just texting you, like, get this guy off, he's shit-talking LSs.
No. My wife is texting me because all the fireworks are waking up our little guy, and she's pissed.
Oh, poor guy. How old is he now?
3.5.
Jeez, man.
Yeah, she said he just calmed down, and then she says, someone's setting off all these damn fireworks. Damn it, he needs to sleep.
Well, my daughter just turned 10, so you want to know, time flies, man.
Yeah, I know already. I'm like, damn, this kid is an inch taller today. So we'll go over more.
Sure.
Oh, this is decent. You may or may not know. It says, what is the size and weight difference between a TKO 600 and a CDO9? A TKO is pretty small, and a CDO9 is huge in my opinion.
I've put a TKO 600 in one car I built. It was a 72 El Camino, and it's definitely lighter and smaller than a CD Trans. How much lighter and how much smaller, I can't say. Like, I can't put a number on that, but it also shifts like a pickup truck.
They're
like
awful. I say to
terrible.
people, it's a T5 that's rated for more power. It's not a great transmission. No, I think they're missing the CDO9 is gigantic, but it just will take anything you throw at it. And then also, it's much heavier. A TKO is basically a T5. So yeah, anybody, a TKO and a T5 I can like throw, and a CDO9 you're like, oh, I'm not gonna lift this more than once today.
Yeah, but like, for instance, that 72 El Camino that I was swapping, like, we put an LS3 in it. It was basically a cam only LS3. And the owner didn't want to cut up the trans tunnel. And those old muscle cars really don't have much room in the tunnel at all, even for a T56. So, like, the TKO made sense for that. And, like, that customer was from New Zealand. Like, we built that car. His fiance she actually bought that car for him, sight unseen, as she proposed to him, and instead of getting a ring, she bought him an El Camino. And, will you marry me? Like, this is New Zealand people for you. And they bought it in Oklahoma, and they bought a wrecked Gen 5 Camaro from Oklahoma, shipped both cars to me. We plucked the engine out of the Gen 5 Camaro. We tried to fit the T56. It was going to require some hacking. He didn't want to do that because in New Zealand and Australia, like, there's El Caminos all over the place. They got utes everywhere. They love them. But like, all the utes that are down there are like, they were actually used as trucks. So like, they're all beat to death.
Yeah, they're destroyed.
And they were all like base models. So, you know, he wanted a nice one. So we built that El Camino. Him and his wife, when it was done, they flew up from New Zealand, got in it, drove it from here to California, and then shipped it back to New Zealand from California. And he sent me a picture of it out on the beach in New Zealand. And that was pretty freaking cool.
That is awesome. Well, someone donated money and asked a question, so I like to ask.
Oh, no, we have to answer it.
I like to ask those people as soon as possible. So it's kind of confusing, so I'm going to ask him to clear it up. But he says, I have a 60 4L80E computer setup. What kind of problems would I have if I try to use a 93 4L80E trans? Can it be done? I have one with almost no miles. So he's saying 60 4L80E, so I think he just mixed up something. So he might mean he has a 60E computer or something. So we'll wait for him to clarify. I'll ask.
Okay.
I mean, a 93 4L80E is the same. There's like a new and an old, and it depends on like fluid path and some other things, but essentially they're the same. And the older ones have a different internal wiring harness, is what I know. So there's only a few minor changes you have to do to make either work. And what you should do is update to the newest wiring, is what my buddy Cameron always says. All right.
Yeah, there's a lot more changes for the 60E over the years than there were for the 80E.
Yes, many. Because it sucks so bad, they had to change it many times. That's the harsh truth. All right. Other than GM platforms, which platforms are the easiest to swap an LS into while retaining AC? I don't know. I don't know if you really do that many others.
I mean, I don't think it's really hard to keep AC in anything, as long as you've got the right tools to make the lines. If nobody makes an adapter to bolt the native AC compressor to the motor.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's just something most people are like. It's funny what people will do and then not install AC.
Yeah.
Oh man, they're pounding fireworks. Jesus. My wife's
I can't really hear them at all. Don't worry about
it. I have a good noise canceling mic, and it only works in a certain distance, but my wife's gonna go stab someone in the throat probably.
Oh, are they celebrating the holiday today?
I don't know. I mean, it's awesome here otherwise, but that's just gonna wind her up.
This is a new holiday. Is it going to be a firework holiday?
I don't know. The one guy just parties very infrequently, so you just gotta let him go. But it's gonna, it's gonna wear on her. So my kid was pretty rough today. So
so you're trying to get some sleep.
They've both had it. So if this keeps them both up, that's otherwise it's not a big deal. But
yeah,
he had a rotten day. Oh, he says. It's a 1980 280ZX with a LQ4 6-liter and a 700 R4. It's 2,500 pounds with him in it. It's quite the upgrade from the 406 carbureted small block. So he says he has a 6.0 and a 480E. What problems would I have trying to use a 93? Can it be done? Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's like an internal harness and not much else. It's if you're asking if it's a pain in the ass or not, it's not bad at all, basically. So you're fine. Oh, people saying they can hear rockets in the chat. Yeah, they're setting off a bunch of shit now. So the beard is coming in amazing here, Stephen. Your beard is coming in very good on the.
I've had customers send me beard products because of. Yeah, it's pretty nice. I've never grown a beard before, so.
There's still fire in them. Now they're doing like one every 2 seconds forever here. Anyway.
They got to run out eventually.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? So here's a good one. It says obligatory pizza and ice cream question. So what people always ask is, what's your favorite pizza and what's your favorite ice cream and blah, blah.
Okay, well, there's a pizza joint around the corner from my house that makes a kind of pizza that they call a lasagna pizza.
Interesting.
But it's really not like lasagna. I don't know really why they call it a lasagna pizza. It's not a thick crust like a Sicilian, and it's not a thin crust like a traditional pizza. It's somewhere in between, and it's got
call Chicago pizza or something like that.
Maybe, yeah.
Someone made a meme the other day, and it says, "This is Chicago pizza," and it showed a casserole thing of lasagna.
Well, it's got pepperoni, sausage, meatballs, ricotta cheese, and then just pizza sauce and mozzarella cheese on it too. That's my favorite pizza by far, but I can only eat about one slice of it without feeling like I'm gonna puke because it's so filling.
Yeah.
And ice cream. Lately, it's been the what do they call that? Party cake? Birthday cake ice cream?
You mean like confetti cake or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like every place calls it something different, but it's got the chunks of cake in it. That one.
I'm telling him to look on. So he says, thanks, I looked everywhere. Nobody will really get into it. Because everyone's an expert until you ask them how or why. I've learned that. Because I would say stuff like, who has a stock OS? Who has like a P01 or whatever Gen 3 computer that's running Flex? And people are like, oh, I have one. And I'm like, cool. Can you send me the tune file or explain how or what operating systems did you mesh? Because as far as I know and what I've looked up, no one has an 80E segment in a flex fuel car because they're all 60Es and blah. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, oh, so you don't know shit. This is what happens every time someone's an expert. I drill them and then they don't know. Yeah, I told him to ask on Sloppy Public, and Cameron or someone else can chime in on like the 2 or 3 things you have to do.
I was looking at Sloppy Public before this interview, and somebody had posted a question about how realistic is it to get an engine swapped in one weekend? And then we just talked about your car in a G35 being swapped and what we did in a parking lot at LS Fest. And I didn't answer that question because...
I didn't either, because I'm like, it depends on your skill level and the parts you have and your motivation level. And if you drink beer and eat pizza the whole weekend, you're not going to get shit done. And if you have friends that aren't motivating and just stare and comment and backseat drive, all of those things factor in. But like I built my Colorado in 18 days and I wasn't working as hard as I can. So, and that was like complete fuel system, Ford Explorer cut down 8.8 with I welded my own leaf perches on it, engine and trans and wiring and literally everything. So
Yeah.
what did someone else ask here I wanted to go over? I had lasagna pizza for the first time in Australia, this guy writes. Oh, this is a good one. It says, Matt,
Okay.
I really enjoyed seeing you helping tune so many people on Rocky Mountain Race Week. Did you see that?
I
My
saw
picture on a
that.
stick?
Yeah.
My buddy
Yeah.
Dane made my picture on a stick and they were just putting it everywhere. So, let's hear
How
about
fast
his...
was that R8 you rode in?
I forget how fast he has gone. I don't think he's running all out quarter. They detuned it to run the 10.0 class, and
Yeah.
he still came in second with an average of like 10.008. That's how tight that 10.0 class is.
It's crazy.
And that's the first time he's gone out to a competition. So again, like, I think he placed first or second at a roll race event, and then he placed first or second somewhere else, and then he drove all the way out to Rocky Mountain Race Week and placed second. And like, it's the first 4 months he's even had the car. So that's just incredible for that platform. Let's talk about this R35 greatness you have coming down the pipeline.
R35 greatness.
Is that you or me or what? Who has an R35?
Well, I was talking about the all-wheel drive oil pan that would allow you to use the G35 front diff, which is the same as an R35 front diff.
Oh,
So I
maybe that's
guess
what he meant.
theoretically you could use the same oil pan setup to swap a R35 GTR if you wanted.
Oh. I wanted to
Which
do that because I go to
I would love to do that.
I go to GTR World Cup every year, and I think a lot of them were scared because I said, "Can you guys get me a wrecked GTR shell? Because I'm gonna LS swap it and run faster than 80% of you guys."
I know where we can get one right now.
Oh man,
It's not wrecked either.
I'm 17 projects deep over here. Otherwise, I'd jump all over it.
It just happens to be theft recovered with no engine and transmission in it.
How much?
We'll talk later. We'll make things happen.
Oh no! Anybody want to buy all my cars? I have a lot of equity in vehicles. No, I just have an ocean of money in cars that I could sell today.
That's okay. You want assets right now.
That's what it is. Liquid assets and vehicles.
Yeah.
This is my question. A couple of these have been mine. And
Okay.
It says, what is your favorite thing about the auto industry right now? And then what is the worst thing that you think?
Okay. I think my favorite thing about the auto industry is that there's literally something for everyone. Like, anybody can get into it and anybody can have a piece of the pie because it's so diverse. Like, people talk about, competition in the industry and things like that. Like, the industry is huge. I don't think Sicky's hurting. I'm not hurting. Like, we're doing okay because there's enough enthusiasts out there that want to do cool things with cars. So you can get into any niche you want and find your crowd and make parts. And if you want to start a business doing it, you can likely be successful doing it as long as you're, make quality products and you treat your customers right. But I just think that the industry itself is so huge. It's kind of amazing how diverse it is and how many different things you can get into. I think my least favorite thing about the industry, or
yeah, just what's your favorite thing about car industry right now, and what's the stupidest or thing you hate the most about car industry right now?
I don't know if there's anything I necessarily hate about it other than the fact that, like, I'm a realist and I do believe that at some point in my lifetime, gasoline internal combustion engine cars are going to go away.
I know it, and I'm not upset about it either. It's just better in every aspect.
Yeah, listen, electric cars are, in all reality, faster in every way now than gas cars, and they haven't even been around that long when you really think about it. But the fastest cars up Pikes Peak are gas cars or electric cars because they don't care about altitude. And
I've been following Popst on all his things, and then Summit just started to release that they are doing stuff. And Brian Nutter had told me months ago that they're going to have an entire EV section, and he was going to drive them. And I was like, "That's cool." And now they're finally releasing all that, so I can say it out loud now.
Yeah, But I mean, I don't hate that. I just, it's a little sad to me. I mean, there's, you know, an aspect of the, I don't know if I want to use the word art, but the visceral nature of internal combustion engines, the the emotional um, response you get from the noises and the smells and things like that that just don't exist with electric cars.
Yeah.
That I think because of that, there'll always be like a small niche there. And even if you won't even be able to go to a gas station and get gas anymore, there'll still be companies like VP or Ignite or whatever that you'll be able to buy barrels of fuel from for probably $50 a gallon, but so you can keep your old internal combustion hot rod on the road in the future, but it's not going to be mainstream. Um, and that's, again, I don't hate it. I just think it's sad because it's like the end of the era, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And what I also think is funny is I know that like Motec and some other places are making standalone controllers for electric engines because I've seen that Sasha from On the Point Dyno has been
That 350Z
he's helping
hybrid.
them, and he has an MR2. He has something, a Toyota, I think, that has the whole battery bank and setup in it also that's 100% electric.
Oh,
I think
really?
it's an
Okay.
MR2, and he staggered batteries all over it to put the weight where he wanted, so that's cool. And
Yeah.
then also, uh, yeah, so I think when a cheap enough standalone controller comes out, that'll be incredible. And then, oh yeah, Sasha and the other guys were taking this thing around for laps, and they were saying that they took people that were extremely fast on the track, and people were crashing off the track because you're not in fourth gear, you can't hear the RPMs, you don't, so they're flying into a corner and they're too fast because you can't hear, the sensation's kind of not there.
Yep.
And then they smack it, like they get halfway through the corner and they rip it and it just blows the tires and crashes off the course because they're not used to like 1,000 foot-pounds in the middle of the RPM band, like instantly accessible. There's no
Yeah.
rush.
Yep.
It's just like tire spin crash.
Yep.
And then my friend, supposedly the end of this month, at some point this month, he's supposed to get a plaid, which goes like a
Oh, really?
920 out of the gate. So I want to do a review on one of those because
That's crazy.
that should be disgusting. I think they said it pulls like 1.2 Gs or 1.5 Gs of acceleration. It actually accelerates harder than it slows down. And I think it finally beat McLaren Senna is one of the fastest road legal cars that can do a 0 to 100 to 0, I believe, and it's in like 8 seconds or something. And the Tesla can do it faster than that. So
And it's a four-door.
it's a four-door, and it probably weighs 1,000,000 pounds because that's the nature of a big luxury battery car. So
Yeah.
yes,
That actually,
someone. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that actually feeds into one of the first questions that somebody asked on what's the future of LOJ.
Electric
Um,
motor.
there is, like, in the back of my mind, thoughts about EV kits for not even just like classic muscle cars, but I don't know, third gen, fourth gen Camaros, Z32s, like, because at some point in the future, when you can't buy gasoline anymore, somebody's still going to want to have their classic car, but be able to take it out to the local car show. And maybe they just want to put a simple 100-mile, 200-mile range electric power plant in it, so that they can have the look of the old muscle car, but um, the practicality of an electric vehicle at that point. So that's been like a thought of mine, but I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer, and the figuring that aspect out is, I'm humble enough to admit that it's beyond my skill set right now. I'd have to team up with somebody who knows EV stuff a lot better than me.
Yeah, I can't
So
wait for the standalone stuff for Tesla motors and stuff to come out. And then also, on top of that, there's a guy called Webb Motorworks. You ever hear of that guy?
no.
He sells a small block that looks exactly like a small block, but it's a battery and electric motor bank. And it has the same bolt pattern. You can put a TH350 or a Muncie or whatever. He's already doing it. So it looks, and it even has like some spinning components. He has one that looks like a flathead, I think. And then you take the valve cover off and it has battery connections for you to easily work on. So
Oh my gosh.
he sells a lot of stuff like that, and it's the same exact size and engine mounts as a small block, so you can literally take it out and put it in. If you guys are listening and you have Instagram, look him up. It's Web Motorworks, and there's someone else. What is? Oh yeah, someone said it's a Lotus Evora is what Sasha has. That's 100% electric with a Tesla engine. That's the one that I had seen. And then what else was I? I lost it already.
Is
But
it one QBs?
Web. Oh, there's
Yeah.
like EV West that does a lot of conversions. You see the old Porsches with the electric motors and the swapped
Yep.
Volkswagen Beetles. I think that's awesome. Like you said, it's incredible to have an old car but with electric motors because those guys don't drive them far. And I like older cars too, but I don't want them to be a piece of shit I can't drive. So yeah, that
Yep.
makes them incredible. And then also, what I think is incredible, I think a company should sell a chassis that you can just body swap. Like Tesla should sell the entire motor and battery thing, and you
Okay.
can just put, like, you can take an El Camino and just drop it on that. I don't know. I think that would be
Somehow with
cool.
like modular wheelbase, modular track width somehow.
Yeah, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
somehow, yeah, and then obviously if it's bigger, you can put more, because that's the whole battery and drivetrain solution right there. So
Yep.
I think that new Ford electric truck is cool as hell too, because it's like all compartments. Because
Yeah.
there's no truck drivetrain everywhere.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Like the biggest frunk ever.
Yeah, it has a massive. Because you open one of those hoods on like those Dodge Rams, you're like, man, imagine if this was. This is like the entire back of a Tahoe, right here.
Yep. And then it still has the bed.
Yeah, it still has a damn bed. What else was? Oh, see, this is one of my questions too. I have it somewhere, but I wanted to ask one of these older questions here. Someone says, has anyone played with the Connect and Cruise LT4 with a 6L80 from GM? I'm putting one in an 86 Jaguar. I've never used
I
the
have
Crate
not.
LT4 and 6L. I don't know if you have.
No, I have not. I mean, I played with the Gen 5 stuff, but not that particular package.
Yeah, that's the whole Crate, I believe. Oh, Potato is here. Here we go. Okay. Here's a good one. What do you think? What's going to happen, or what do you think's going to happen with the RPM Act, since they're getting spicy now?
I don't know what's going to happen with it. I'll be honest with you. And there's a certain aspect that, I've signed the petitions and all that stuff, but some of these things are just literally out of our control. And, to worry about it, I don't know. There's only so much I can do in my sphere of influence. I've signed the petitions. I've talked to the people that I know of about it. It could have a real negative impact on the industry. It could also have no impact depending on what gets passed or not. So
I went on at length about that in one podcast. I'd have to look it up and tell people if they want to hear. Yeah. I just ranted for like 20 minutes about it. I think it was on Arnie's. I just went out of control and he just let me go for a while. I was like, we did this to ourselves, and I just was off the hook about it. Let me move this. So, yeah, that's a good answer. How did you first hear about sloppy mechanics? I think when I called you.
No, I think my first car I ever built for a customer, Javon.
Oh yeah,
he was that. I think he told me about you. He used to live near you, so he told me about you before you ever bought that kit from me. And I was surprised when you called me about buying a kit. So I was like,
I surprised everybody when I was like, I bought the whole kit for like 10, 11, some thousand. They're like, what?
Yeah, you wouldn't even let me give you any kind of price break on it because you were like, I want to have an honest opinion evaluating it.
I want to say whatever I want.
Yeah, I don't want my judgment colored by you giving me a price break. So, and I'll be honest with you, like, I had a lot of respect for you saying that because
Well, that's the
Most
whole
people
thing.
are chasing.
That's the whole thing of what I do. So unless someone says I want to work with you and you can tell me what you think and not make a video about it. But then other stuff
Right.
people ask and then I can say whatever I want. And one of my stipulations is Holly did the same thing. I don't want to sign anything. I won't do it. I'll disagree and purchase it and say what I want. And then I won't if they're like you have to say this, I don't want to do it. So a lot of it is I don't sign anything and I can say whatever I want. And that's the way I like to do it. Otherwise, I kind of don't. So even Holly, I've never signed a contract with them. People think that I'm like obligated or they're paying me or no. They definitely
Yeah.
send me things for free, obviously. But if I didn't like it, you guys would be the first people to know. And I've done that many times. Milwaukee, so many people could see all the Milwaukee stuff that I had. And they're like, Milwaukee needs to sponsor you. And then eventually people got enough people's attention. And then a woman, I think her name was Heather. She's like the Northeast rep or something, social media. And then my wife got in contact with her after other people told us to. And they sent me a pamphlet. And they said, you can choose any 2 tools in this entire pamphlet. And 2 things that I've never seen people use is the underhood light. So I got what no one used. So there's plenty of reviews where people are like, this is fantastic, and they have banners everywhere and a completely clean tool bench. I'm like, this stuff's garbage. And you people are garbage. You can tell right away. And I was like, I'm going to get this underhood light. No one talks about it. And then they had an 18-volt impact Sidewinder 3/8 because they have the really nice... That's one of the reasons why I went Milwaukee is that. And then I got everything else. I'm like, this is fantastic. So I got that, and the M12 non-fuel was stronger. And I did a bunch of tests where I tightened an exhaust manifold to a head, and I loosened it with torque wrenches. And it was within a foot-pound, and then like the M12 was a foot-pound higher in a bunch of instances. And I'm like, what a piece of garbage, because it's like 14 inches long. It takes an M18 at a 45-degree angle. You can't fit it anywhere. I was like, if this is an impact, I want it to be able to break an exhaust bolt that won't come loose. And I was like, this thing is awful. No wonder nobody uses it. It was like $180 or $200 some dollars. I was like, this is hot garbage. But I'm like, this underhood light is amazing. I didn't know it existed. It's fantastic. I would buy it. In fact, I bought it for my friend. I just bought it.
I have that light. I love it.
Yeah, it's incredible. And after that, they were like, kind of declined to talk, and they said it's okay to say what you want and choose anything from this thing. I mean, I could have taken the easy route. They had like a 5-inch opening M18 fuel portable bandsaw, which I knew would be incredible, but I wanted to choose things no one talks about.
Right.
So the one was incredible and the one was total garbage. And I said, can I say whatever I want? And they said, yeah, but now they won't talk to me anymore. So that wasn't the case. So yeah, there's plenty of times where that stuff has happened. There was another time recently where a guy was trying to sell injectors as a company on Sloppy Mechanics. It was before Snake Eater, and they were PPE, Power Precision Engineering or something like that. And he's like, these are great, these are fantastic, I'm going to sell them to you guys, blah, blah, blah. And someone on there was like, I'm not buying this at all until Matt reviews it. This is Matt's thing. He's like, oh, give me his contact info. And I was like, dude, you know, we'll check these out, but I'm going to tell everybody what happens. Oh, that's great. No problem. I'm like, I can check them out and not tell anybody, and you can just stop trying to sell them. And he's like, nope, I believe in them. I have a good product, whatever. So he sent me these injectors, and I sent them to Eric Durr, who has an ASNU machine. Okay. And they did everything wrong with Chinese injectors, and then 2 or 3 things we didn't even know they could do. They had like dynamic flow rate. Some wouldn't flow at all. Some were leaking wide open. Some were just spraying in a pattern like left. They were all over the board. And I showed the whole thing, and I was like, I gave you every option to not do this, but here's the result is they're awful. So some people did buy them, and he did refund them, but he kind of disappeared after that. So yeah. I'm like, don't tell me I can say whatever I want.
Right.
Matt, the soapbox, put it back in the garage. Yes, that's true. Oh, this
I mean,
guy.
I love my Milwaukee tools, but I've broken my fair share of them. I'll be honest with you; they're not quite as durable as you might think they would be.
I think
You know?
there's some that are better, like DeWalt and Ryobi make some better tools, but I think the Milwaukee ecosystem is the best, and their warranty is amazing. I've been a
Yeah.
douchebag and totally broke one of their drills trying to get a lawn tractor to run and keep changing the jetting, and I had like a 5/16 and I was just spinning it, and it took off, and I was an idiot and didn't yank it, and I let go, so the brakes came on, and it spun and whacked me in the
Ooh.
shin and broke the drill inside. It broke the coupler completely off the nose of the drill. So it smashed my leg, and then the drill fell apart with the socket on the ground. And I'm like, cool. And it was an old one that was beat to shit. And I took it in and I gave it to them, and Milwaukee sent me a brand new one.
Wow.
So, and they sent
So
me an
where'd you take it
upgraded
into?
one.
Home Depot?
What's that?
Where'd you take it into? Home Depot?
No, I don't go. Home Depot will scam you, and they sell you like a year-old product for the same price as a new one. They just don't stock them. That's what I learned. There's a place near me called Ackroyd Hardware, and they carry the newest, best price for every Milwaukee thing ever. We call it, my friend and I call it Milwaukee Nazi Germany. Because it's literally every part, and they push everything else out, and they only, so it's awesome because they literally have everything. Yeah, this guy, Killswitch, goes, I have the 5-inch bandsaw, and it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I
Yeah.
should have said it was amazing, and they would have sent me a million things. But at that point, I already had like $4,000 in Milwaukee tools. I didn't give a shit what
Yeah.
what they thought.
I've got one of their old corded 5-inch throat bandsaws that I bought one of those swag off-road tables for.
Oh, nice.
That was like one of the best investments I ever made.
People
That
say
swag
that.
table's awesome.
I have
It's
an
really
old,
awesome.
I have a plug-in old Milwaukee that my friend built me because he says they throw out when they break. He works for a big company. When they break, they throw them out and they get a new one because they just have them. So he takes them out of the trash all the time, or people know that he takes them and they hand them to him when they break. So then he has 10 saws, so he can make 1 or 2 good ones out of it and throw the rest away. So he gave me one for doing him a bunch of favors, and I've had that forever now.
Yeah.
But I've seen people do the table, but I don't really like having stuff like that. I mean, maybe I should. People say it's good, but
No, I'm telling you, for like fab and exhaust and all, it made life a lot easier.
I just
Got
hold
like
it in my hand.
perfectly square cuts.
Yeah,
And
the saw, the table makes it all happen.
yeah.
This is long stuff here.
Uh-oh.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a short one because Potato R33 is in here and he asks the best questions. He
Okay.
asks a bunch of the same ones, but at the end of the show, when we're out of material, we go, "Hey, dude, ask questions." He just can fire them. It's amazing.
Okay.
So he says, "Let's just get this out of the way. Can you get the biggest hammer in your shop and show it to us?"
Sure.
He always asks this question. And what's nice is he kind of breaks up from the serious or whatever stuff. So
I'd have to go to the other building to get it, though. But it okay.
well, you can just say
Really?
it's this big. No, you can decline
It's
it.
it's this big. It's bigger than the screen. It's a 15-pound Husky sledge.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's good enough. Yes, this is something I've hounded you about many times. I know you guys were talking about doing CAN bus for the Holly. Where are you with that? I asked Stephen about it a while ago. I remember I was badgering you, and I don't think your CAN bus guy was interested because of all the other stuff he's doing for you.
Yes, but I have a new CAN bus guy now,
Oh.
so he'd probably be interested.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I was really, as soon as I got my stuff with Holly, all I've been telling people is you want to be a millionaire is make a CAN bus box like yours for E38, like a Corvette or a Camaro or whatever that just spits all of that data because relatively simple, the Holly outputs and stuff are simple is what everyone tells me, and you can just
Right.
if you can just fire it over the CAN, you stand to make $1 million because HP tuners and everything else is getting more difficult. So doing an integrated CAN bus thing is the way.
Yeah, I mean the Holly, using the Holly analog outputs into a CAN bus box that then converts it to CAN language to make everything else work. That's pretty straightforward. Holly has CAN also, and from what I've been told, again, I hire a guy to do my CAN stuff for me. I'm not a software engineer. I've learned in life that do the things you're good at, and the things that you're not good at, find the best people you can to do it for you, and you'll end up with the best result. And that's what I did for the CAN stuff. And from what I've been told, the Holly CAN language though is kind of shitty. It's tough to work with. So that's not to say it can't be done. I'm sure it can, but it would be a lot of reverse engineering. Like, it's not an open book contacting them and saying, "Hey, what's at what addresses?" You have to figure it all out. If he's
interested, I have probably 5 or 10 friends that already have a majority of the CAN addresses for a lot of things. Because I have a friend, he owns like E90swap.com, Michael Page. He has written his own CAN box that you plug it into an E90 BMW, and it satiates all the stock things, and then it makes the speedometer work, and it makes the HVAC work, and it turns off all the angry. So like if it's looking for something, it just tells it it's there, and it's happy with everything. So it doesn't even need the stock computer. He has the Terminator and a box, and it just makes everything else happy. It's like nothing ever changed. So he already has majority of the Holly stuff to convert speed, RPM, coolant, everything you could think of. So he could hit the ground running with, and Mike was willing to give a lot of that away, almost all of it, and then everybody else had a bunch of other information and CAN addresses, and they had it, just no one was doing it. And I asked like a year and a half ago, and then now the other day, Holly's like, here's a 8 input, 8 output box, and I'm like, guys, you could have been there, and then you would have had the product. Holly might not have ever made it because you already did, blah, blah. Anyway, there it goes.
Yeah. Or Holly would have bought it off you for $100,000.
Exactly. I said, you want to make 6 figures overnight? Make this and contact Holly. And then they were saying they were worried about legality. I'm like, hey, at this point, I know these guys pretty well. I'll ask them ahead of time. And they said to me, if you guys have it, show it to us. Let us know, and we'll pay you. We're not going to sue you for doing that.
Right.
So, anyway. Yes, people are like, that would be a game changer. Correct. It would be. Okay. So here's the long one.
Okay.
I'll just read it. I don't know if it's multiple questions or what. He says, I'm mostly impressed with LOJ's reverse engineering tools, like how the Frontier adapter was adopted to an IRS with cut plates designed from reverse engineering the frame rail sections. It'd be great to talk about how they decided what equipment to buy and what risks were understood about the expense and capabilities of the hardware/software, but super great work, and I'd love to do the exact same thing one day and use similar hardware at work.
So he's probably referring to my 3D scanner.
Yes, I remember you sent me a picture like the day you got it. You're like, check out my tool.
Yeah, that's the most expensive thing I've ever bought, next to my house. And I guess how I came to the decision to buy that scanner, when I worked for the Navy and worked in the prototype and engineering department, we used Creaform equipment, so I was familiar with it. And there are a lot of options out there, but there's one truth in life that I think a lot of people don't like to believe, but you need to believe, is that oftentimes you do get what you pay for. So, there's cheap options for 3D scanners. There's cheap options for metrology equipment and scanning equipment and measuring equipment and things like that. But the inexpensive versions of that often give you less than ideal results. And okay. So the thing with the 3D scanners is that depending on what you're scanning, whether it's a car, a piece of furniture, a house, I don't know what you want to scan. There's a lot of variability in how flexible the piece of equipment is. So, for example, the 3D scanner that I bought from Creaform, it's a GoScan Spark 3D. That scanner has a very dynamic range for the type of materials you can scan. So you might not think that matters, but whether something is a matte surface or a shiny surface or a textured surface or a smooth surface, all comes into play onto whether the scanner can accurately capture the data. And the other aspect is what the scanner uses for a point of reference. So you've probably seen videos of guys using they're called CMM arms, coordinate measuring machine arms. It looks like a tripod with like this robot arm that they can move around and touch off to certain spots, and the software will capture that data where they touched off. That piece of equipment is calibrated to the home position that's on the floor of where that tripod is sitting. And if while they're got that tripod set up, they're scanning an engine bay and some punk in the shop walks by and trips and kicks the leg of the piece of equipment and it moves a 16th of an inch, they need to throw away that whole scan and start over again. It's garbage because it lost its home, and it everything that you're capturing from that point forward doesn't matter.
Well, same with a CNC. As soon as it
Yes.
loses any kind of home position, it's going to obliterate your workpiece or run off the table or smash into.
Yep.
It's going to head crash, is what they say, I think.
Yep. So the scanner that I bought, it continually references the geometry it has already scanned to determine where it is in space. So if I'm scanning this is a terrible example, but my ball jar here, if I'm scanning, I got it sitting on the table and I scan it, and it's got this texture where ball is embossed on it here, and then I grab the jar and I move it and I start scanning again, the scanner is going to recognize that feature and reacquire home and then acquire more data off of that. Then I can move it again and it'll continually do that. And it can even do it more accurately if I apply like these little stickers that are targets, they're called, but they're these little reflective dots. It'll recognize, these 3 dots are geometrically positioned away from each other here. So even if I stop scanning, flip over upside down in the engine bay and start scanning again, it's going to just continually be able to reacquire where it is. It doesn't care in that regard. So it's very versatile. And I can scan an entire vehicle from front bumper to back bumper within 5/1000ths of an inch accuracy over that distance.
That's
which
insane.
is insane with something handheld. Now, because of that level of versatility and that level of accuracy, the piece of equipment was expensive. But I knew, depending what I wanted to do, I needed to be able to, like, I was able to scan the entire engine bay of a car that was on the lift, then raise the lift, go back under the car, turn the scanner back on. It recognized the transmission tunnel area of the firewall that I had scanned previously, reacquired home. I was able to scan the whole underside of the car, and basically I can model the entire drive line virtually now in SolidWorks, rather than, when I first developed my first kit, it was, okay, I got a 300ZX in the garage, let's shove an LS in there. That looks like about the good spot to put it, and I was using tape measures and protractors and pieces of cardboard and all to figure out the shape for my motor mounts, and then putting that into CAD and then printing to scale on pieces of paper and cutting the pieces of paper out and holding them in the engine bay. And yeah, that engine mount looks like it's still about the right shape. The amount of time that I spent going back and forth, I was able to invest a lot of money in a piece of equipment and now save hours upon hours upon hours of physical labor R&D time trying to make and remake parts to fit right. I mean, I still do that. I scan it and I design the part virtually, and then I make a prototype. But I feel like every time I make a prototype now, I go to test fit it and it just fits, because the equipment that I have is so accurate for developing those parts that it saved so much time It's not the type of piece of equipment that's going to be a 100% ROI on day one of owning it, but over 2 to 3 years, the amount of hours that it's going to save me. Not to mention I'm getting older and like crawling around on a concrete floor in a garage and all is not like the most fun for me anymore. But sitting on a computer and designing things virtually and the air conditioning kind of is. So, there's a lot of benefits there that,
I also think, so you could have someone bring a car and then you can shoot the whole thing and they can go, essentially, instead of you sitting and trying and with a great deal of confidence you can build those parts, or you can at least prototype within like 99.5% of fitting and you can send it to them to try, and then you're like, okay, I'm there. Yeah. I'm done.
I mean, for instance, like people talk about how expensive the Cook's headers are that I have in my kits. Well, I mean, Cook stuff is expensive in the first place because it's really nicely made stuff. It's quality. It's made in the U.S. with U.S. source materials, and it has a lifetime warranty. So if you want all those things, it costs money for those things flat out. But on top of that, like when I wanted Cook's headers for my 300ZX swap kit back in 2013, 2014, I had to put a 300ZX on a trailer and drive it to North Carolina and drop it off at Cook's and leave it at Cook's for 6 months while they developed a set of headers in it and built the jig and did all that stuff. And I had to pay them an engineering fee to do that. And then I had to amortize that engineering fee over how many sets of headers I thought I was going to sell in all the years I was in business and all that fun stuff. Now I can 3D scan the car here and send Cook's the files. And they make a set of headers and send it to me. And I put it in the car. And I'm not spending a week towing cars back and forth and spending months waiting for them to do the developmental work because we can figure it out virtually now. There's so much flexibility that's been afforded by buying that piece of equipment that it's hard to articulate all of it in a podcast. So, not to mention I have random other local businesses that have nothing to do with automotive that are like, I need to reverse engineer this thing. Can you scan it for me? And they bring it over and I scan it and charge them a flat fee for the engineering work. And it's like another revenue source. But
yeah, of course, then you run into that. Now people know you're like the only person in 3 states that's able to mobile laser scan.
Yeah, exactly. So
where
is it Potato's turn again?
He has another one. This I think we kind of answered it. Stephen, do you think you'll get the Holly CAN bus to communicate with some Nissan stock stuff? So you said, it's something. Not on the top of your list at all, but I'm sure that anybody that's good with CAN bus can make that stuff work. But is it profitable for you as a business decision? So
possibly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the answer. You could do it tomorrow, but is there enough people buying it to, like you said, absorb the upfront costs of making it work, other than me and this guy?
Right.
Because I want it, but who cares? Who cares if I want it? This is another. So it's 3 CAN bus questions.
Oh boy.
My question also was, why are Nissan clutch pedals and slaves and feel so shitty? It seems like it's a thing. Like the more you search about it, people don't have like a good solution, and like the pedal doesn't. I did a bunch of those mods to try to get the pedal to come up, and sometimes it just as far as other cars, it just isn't that great. I don't know what the.
It's funny, that hasn't been my experience, but maybe I'm just so used to driving shitty clutches for so many years that I don't even realize it anymore.
It just takes forever to bleed, and I don't know. There's a lot of
bleeding. I will agree, bleeding a Nissan clutch is like a nightmare. We bought a motive power bleeder with the correct adapter, and that's really the only way to do it in short order successfully. Trying to traditionally bleed a Nissan clutch is freaking awful. But with that being said, a lot of it is Nissan uses smaller diameter master and slave cylinders than most other manufacturers do, which in theory doesn't matter, because what you're worried about is displacement of fluid in master equals displacement of fluid in slave to get X amount of travel. But the problem is, like, when you try to put a T56 trans with that concentric slave mated to a Nissan master cylinder, the Nissan master cylinder doesn't move enough fluid to correctly actuate the slave, so you need to swap the master cylinder to something larger diameter to get the same fluid flow ratio, the same volume ratio between the master and slave. Beyond that, cheap plastic rubber or cheap plastic bushings and all the pivots that wear out on the clutch pedal assembly, that's a pretty common thing. And the older Nissan clutch forks in like the 300 ZXs and the early 350Zs and G35s were this stamped steel piece of junk that would flex. And then they went later to like a cast iron fork. And if you upgraded the cast iron fork, that makes a world of difference in the clutch feel for sure.
Yeah, it's just many stages to get to like a decent one. And then I noticed like every now and then I had trouble with it, or it would do the stick to the floor thing. And I did a bunch of stuff that I could. And I did the adjustment when I bleed it and pull it back in and out to try to get the most throw to bleed it. And then, yeah, just, I think I asked you the other day again, I'm like, why does this suck so bad? And then, like, I got a slave. It's funny because I pulled that twin disc out and I put the single in, and then it was okay. I zip tied the slave, but then I think I got air introduced somehow. And I put it back on with the single disc, and it was grabbing extremely high. And I'm like, I don't want to roast this clutch if it's not engaging fully. And I'm like, why? Why is it? I don't know why it's not working correctly. So I went to bleed it when it was already bled, and it went to the floor. And I'm like, why? Why did you do this to me? I guess I'm mad because it just happened. So then I bought a master, and I swapped out the master today, and it must have taken me... I pulled the seat out and I pulled the master in like 5 minutes. Nothing. And then I pulled it out of the firewall, no problem. I put the other one in. The hardest thing I had to do was screw the brake line back on. I could barely get the right angle and couldn't get my hand in. Like the whole other side of my forearm is red and raw from jamming it in there. And then I went to bleed it, and that took like 2 hours.
One thing that I've noticed with the Nissan's master cylinders is... sometimes if the rod connecting the master to the pedal isn't adjusted properly, when the pedal returns, it won't return the piston far enough to allow the fluid to fill again. And the other thing I've learned is, even if it is adjusted right, like if you do the pump, crack the slave, close the slave, let the pedal up, you need to wait like
for it to fill
20 seconds to a half a minute before you do your next series of pumps and bleed, because it takes that long
to fill that
for
bore.
The fluid to fill that master back up, or else you're just pumping nothing and you're just going to be...
I've run into that with other cars, so I did that too. And then what I did is I adjusted that stupid throw back and forth like 6 times until I got decent pump, and then I would suction it. And then I have a thing that I've had it forever for motorcycles and a bunch of other things, but it's a one-way bleed. And I like that a lot because I can hook that up and just pump it, and it only will spit fluid. So as soon as you get the top piece full, it's not doing anything funny. If that top hose doesn't get full, it just pushes the air back and forth. But I got one of those going, and then I had half pedal, and then I moved the rod 6 times, and then everything else, and I did suction. I did like 10 things, and then I eventually got decent pedal, and then I had to move the pedal throw again. Like you said, I've had that before where you've got to pull it and wait, and you've got to get you have to adjust the pedal to get the farthest out motion, and then you have to readjust it to get the clutch grab in the center, because then it's high or low. But yeah, like it was making me nuts today, so that's the only reason.
It can be frustrating for sure.
And then, what's the biggest challenge in making a swap plate kit to strap a manual transmission to an L?
The conflict of bolt patterns. So, like, there's some companies out there that make transmission adapters for all sorts of different engines to transmissions. All sorts. And you would be surprised, or maybe not surprised, to the utter disregard that they give for engine to transmission alignment dowels. Like ignoring them, deleting them, whatever, because like I've had a lot of people for a lot of years asking me for a CD09 to 2JZ adapter. And those are two bolt patterns that are not happy with each other. And there's companies that make them, and they are able to make them because they ignore a couple of the dowels to align all the crap. And like, yeah, it works, but like you're going to wipe out input shaft bearings. You're going to have clutch discs that wear prematurely because the input shaft was out of alignment, so the clutch disc isn't being clamped in the center every time the clutch engages. Or maybe you got lucky when you bolted it together and it was, but then when you pull the trans to replace the clutch after however many drift events, the next one wipes out in one event because it didn't align right the second time. So
I noticed I've put like 3 CD09s in lately because my friend has that S10 with the VR6 turbo with a CD09, and it is so tough to get. I remember this too, so tough to get that initial, and I think it's because your pilot is so perfect, and then also I think it's the heavy spline count. It can be a bear to get that. You're like, why won't you go your home?
Yeah.
Go to your home.
And all of a sudden it just slides together
for
like
30
nothing.
minutes you're sweating your balls pushing this thing, and then you're like, you get mad and you're like, why? And it goes thud and you're like, oh, I'm gonna kill you.
Funny story, when Jeremy Formato was up here at my shop and we were doing his 370Z, we did a twin disc clutch in that setup and CD09 twin disc, and we put everything together and we're trying to put the transmission on the motor, and it's like going halfway on and won't go on. And what we ended up finally doing was the stupid plastic clutch alignment tool, I guess, had enough looseness in the tolerance that, yeah, it would align both clutch discs, but they would be slightly out of clock with each other. So like the input shaft on the trans is a lot more tightly machined. The tolerances are tighter. It would slide into the first disc, but not be able to get into the second disc. So what we ended up doing was loosening the pressure plate and rotating the alignment tool to get the thrust on both splines on the same side before tightening the bolts down, and then it went right together.
That's what we've had to do for the last 2. Is what I've learned now is I wiggle the shit out of that while I'm tightening around, and I try to get it centralized. And then if you can't get the trans, same thing. If it won't throw in like the first 5 pushes, pull it out and just do it again.
Yeah.
Because I've done that where it was hard to pull out, and with T5s and other Mustang and whatever, like 10 spline input shaft, doesn't care. Like you get it close, you pull it all the way down and tighten it, you could still get the tranny in, but the CD09 will not go unless it's perfect. So
that's probably one of the reasons why they hold so much power, because the tolerances are so
alignment.
tight.
I was going to say the same thing, the spline count, and that thing will not go unless it's totally centered, because I can see how that would just wipe bearings and offset the input and output, and the primary, secondary, everything is pissed at that point.
Well, it's funny. I just finished a new adapter. It was literally one guy called me and he was like, I want to put an RB26 all-wheel drive manual transmission into my Infiniti Q50 sedan, which is the VR30 twin turbo all-wheel drive sedan.
AMS Performance has been developing things for it.
Yep. But they all have that 7-speed manual or 7-speed automatic in it. But he wanted a manual, and he actually had a R34 GTR Getrag transmission, the 6-speed manual. He's like, but I want an adapter. So I was like, yeah, I can do that. If you're willing to pay for the development work to make it happen, I can do it. So he sent me a VR30 bell housing. I actually had an RB transmission here. I was able to get some data off of with my scanner. I scanned it all.
I think you posted that on like Instagram. I remember seeing you do that.
Yep. And but that's a perfect example of terrible dowel alignment. So like the RB transmission aligns to the motor with 2 dowels, and one of the dowels is literally dead center of where the starter is on the VR30 motor. So like you can't put adapter plate there for the dowel to line up because the starter wants to be there. And the way those, the modern Nissan motors are, there's not really somewhere to relocate the starter to. Like it's oil pan, front differential, engine block, everything in the way. It's got to be where it is. So what I ended up doing is the adapter plate's 2.5 inches thick. and it's just a whole lot of machining hogged out in the back. So it's thick enough to come around the snout of the starter and then have a hole in it for the dowel to align the transmission still. And it was the only way to do it, but I was able to figure out and got it done. So now this guy's going to put a manual trans in his
Q60
2016, Q50 sedan, which should be pretty awesome when it's done. But so making adapters, that's the biggest problem, making sure you have your dowels in the right spot.
Well, I got to get off in 10 minutes, but I think we're at a good spot anyway. So I ran out of all of our significant highlighted questions, but yeah, if you have anything to add, or if I'm going to ask the live chat to throw down some stuff if they want to. Yeah, I think it has totally changed my mind on the Nissan platform, because I was like, I don't see why people love these, but I'm like, okay, it's what I was surprised with is how old that chassis is, and how it has 146,000, and I used the stock trans, and I had a sway bar with like no bushing at all. It would just bang the frame, and I could hang that thing sideways through fourth, and it would just do what I wanted. It was very confidence inspiring to be able to rifle gears and hang it like that with one hand and shifting. And it was a very neutral platform, very good driver's car. And I'm like, wow, this is a 06. Like, this is incredible for what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, they never had that much power when they came out. But that's the cool thing, is it's capable of it easily. What's crazy, the whole. And then the only things I did the bushings for the rear, because people say it moves so much. And then I think I asked you about one of them where people say the drive shaft does. Oh, it's the bushing in the front of the drive shaft. I guess the bushing allows the diff to walk up and down significantly.
The differential, yeah.
So
the pinion bushings in the differential, they definitely need to get changed.
I did those immediately because one of my friends was like, I have shattered 3 diffs because I never tightened up the pinion bushing. And then someone sent me, I think it was Derek Gaskins, so it only has the one stud in the back, which kind of blew my mind. And he sent me the kit where you bolt it to the diff and it bolts to the other unused part of the chassis, so it holds so I did all that, and it would just annihilate tire and not have any issue. Because people were telling me, like, that car will try to kill you, like the LSD will turn on and off, and I'm like, this thing posies like a dream, and it'll just roast both tires through third and fourth.
That's because you no longer had the factory traction control trying to control things.
Oh, is that why it kills people? Okay.
The factory VDC it leaves a lot to be desired. The vehicle dynamic control. So
it does the brakes and clutch and stuff.
Yep. And what's funny, you mentioned about the one stud on the differential. S13 240SX had 4 studs on the differential.
Huh.
S14 and 300ZX had 2 studs. And then when they went to the 350Z, they went to 1 stud. So I'm just waiting for them somehow, the next one, to have no studs.
It'll just have clips.
Yeah.
Like the plastic body clips to hold your A-pillar on. Just clip the rear end. Oh, here. This guy asked this before, I think. Shed Built Motorsports. Okay. He says, Barra swaps are on the way up. Would you do a Barra to CD09 kit? He'll make a killing. I'd buy it.
If somebody can get me a Barra to scan, I absolutely would.
I think I know somebody that has one, and maybe he would let you borrow it. Matt Selapak?
Don't even have to borrow it. Just tell me where it is. I can bring my laptop and my scanner.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I know a guy, I think Dario, Infamous Automotive in Canada, has a Barra, and I think Matt Selapak has Barras because he works with all the Drag Week Aussie guys ship everything to him, and then they leave from there. He's in North Carolina. He owns CPS, Charleston Performance something, which I always joke
South Carolina.
Yeah, I always joke with him because CPS is Child Protective Services. Me in the Northeast, CPS is like, okay, someone's going to take your kids. So he has shirts and stuff that say CPS. And I'm like, dude, Child Protective Services? And he's like, no one ever thinks that down here. I'm like, well, that's the first thing that comes up to my mind. So, yeah, if you guys have a Barra that Stephen can scan and there's a desire, Yep. How about
I would absolutely do that.
how about
And
they front half of your costs, and then it'll be easy.
yeah, the other thing that I've been talking about with the PSI guys and with Jeremy and Richard Holdner is the Atlas motors.
Yes, they're awesome.
Yeah,
That's what you should do, because there's a million of them.
Yeah,
Do that with a CD09, because
yeah,
they're on the way up bigger than a Barra, because a Barra is super hard to get.
yeah, but the Atlas things are all over the place. So if I did that and a common rear sump, mid sump, and front sump oil pan for them,
They have an atrocious pan. That's what the Nelsons, they make their own pan now. So they take like a half and half of something and put it together to make a.
Yeah, those are those guys out in PA, right? That went like 9s with stock cams.
They are totally pushing the envelope with the Atlas. They have it in 2 different cars. They're gonna do my cage and my Mustang. I'm gonna, not really a cage, but they're gonna do a bunch of chassis work and a roll bar and tie the 4-link into the bar and make an engine mount or a transmission mount and everything for me. So they're gonna do all that soon. So yeah, those guys are incredible knowledge fabricators, everything. I used to tune some stuff for them, but they picked up they can learn so well that they just tune all their own stuff now. I just told them everything I was doing, and the Calvin is like, I could do all this. I'm like, yep, you are totally smart enough. See you in 10 years. Kill Switch is asking again if you make a 2JZ to CD09, and I think like 10 minutes ago you explained no and why.
Yeah. I mean, I can, and it's like I have this to-do list, this whiteboard in my office of all the things that I need to design. It's not all the way down, but it's like more than halfway down.
Yeah. He says, my bad. Yeah, he must have zoned out for it, but yeah.
No, that's all right.
All right. Well, I mean, I got to go soon anyway, so I'm just going to wrap it up quick and say goodbye to everybody. Well, what are we at? Where's my live timer?
2 hours.
Yeah, 2:12. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks for being on, Stephen, and explaining what you do and everything else. And I believe I have the description for your websites and everything in the video thing. If not, people can ask, and I'll dump it in the comments. And then also what I do is I take these episodes and I put them to Anchor, and that authors it on like 12 podcast sites. So if anybody you know wants to hear this, I do audio only versions. So I usually do that in the next few days. But yep. Thanks for being on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It was fun.
Thanks for everybody watching, and we'll see you guys later. Have a good night.
Good night. See ya.